Hi, this is Scott Allen Miller. This is Sam IT here on YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about why email is probably safer than you think it is. We hear this all the time. Everybody everywhere thinks that email is so incredibly insecure. They don't want to use it because they feel that everything that they do is exposed. This is not accurate. Of course, there are really secure methodologies today, things that don't use the public infrastructures in any way. Things that are peer-to-peer, end-to-end encrypted with all kinds of very, very important security measures that were never envisioned during the creation of email. That's great. There are some things like that. And if you're trying to hide from the government, you'll need to look somewhere else. And you're going to get pretty complex in doing so, but that's a completely different discussion. What I want to talk about is why email is not the irrationally insecure thing that everybody thinks it is. Now, of course, if we went back to 1992 and started emailing people using technology and tools of the time, yes, email was kind of insecure. It was just plain text. It was sent over lots and lots of shared machines, each of which could, along the way, stop and read the messages, and in many cases would, because they would cache it. This has created a historical view of email of being incredibly insecure. Don't put anything in there that you're not expecting a lot of other people to be reading, especially your own system administrator, the administrators of every machine along the path. Why wouldn't they read it? It's plain text that's sitting on their servers. They're interested. So, that was 1992. A lot has changed since then. A lot. And even back then, though, it's important to note that email was still just about as secure or more secure than something like fax, even in the early 90s. Things like fax were so insecure that that's why email nobody cared, because we were so used to just everything being exposed. I mean, even regular everyday snail mail is pretty insecure. Sure, it's sealed in a paper envelope, but anybody can re-envelope something, right? And yeah, it passes through the post office, but each person along the way in the post office could, in theory, read it, or at least hold it up to the light. They could deliver it to the wrong place. They could deliver it to your place, but someone might grab it before you get it out of your mailbox. There's a lot of ways that snail mail wasn't secure. The one thing that made it kind of secure was that we had these federal penalties that were so strict that people tended to avoid tampering with your mail, because it was just a little bit dangerous. But people did all the time. If you've ever heard someone say, don't send cash in mail, that's why. Because it's not secure. It's not secure to the point where sending cash kind of makes everyone aware that there's cash in the envelope. So that means people tend to know what's in your envelopes before you even get it. And you're only getting mail that either no one has noticed or doesn't have anything good in it. So when we're talking about email, a lot of things have changed, both technically and in its real-world usage. So technically, the big thing that's changed is, for all intents and purposes, there's no one left who sends email along a path. Email goes directly from point to point, or it goes essentially from point to point, passing through our own vendors along the way. So for example, I may send an email directly to you and it goes from my server to your server, or we pass it along the way through email handling services that are part of our security, so we trust them. So we consider that movement to be secure, such as I have an email proxy who handles my front-end sending. That being said, so we now no longer have those people along the path in the middle who are peering into our email. Most companies, most organizations also now have their email handled in such a way that it's either overseen by a number of policies internally, now we're getting out of technical here, so that it's not simple for just anyone on the system to go and read our email. Even the administrator may not have direct access to read our email in many cases. Could they get it? Yes, absolutely. But do they have simple access to it? Is it simply in front of them? Are there safeguards to make sure they're not reading it? Yes, in most cases. That's if we're using our own internal email. If we're dealing with email from a major entity, such as Office 365 or Google Mail, Gmail, then we're dealing with companies with an incredible amount of internal security, and you can really safely be aware that they are not reading your email. There's no chance that, now Google does scan your email, they do not read your email. These are two different things. In one case, they are looking for information about you. The other, they are actually reading your email, and that is not what's happening. There's nobody at Google interested in your, well, they may be interested, but they're not reading your email. They would never do that. The cost to them, the risk to them is so high, they would never do this. They have lots and lots of security to make sure this doesn't happen. more security than you could possibly have in your own email systems. So, and they also have much less knowledge about what's going to be valuable in your email, so they have less reason to look at it than someone locally. So we have between the technical point-to-point change in how email is done, so we basically have no one reading in between, to the ecosystems around the endpoints have made email dramatically more secure just in how it's sent. Now we also have to look at that the SMTP protocol, which is the Simple Mail Transport Protocol that everyone knows it goes over TCP port 25, is inherently plain text. Just like HTTP is plain text and FTP is plain text, that's how these things work. What all of those protocols have done, including SMTP, is put their email encapsulated in SSL. So HTTPS over port 443, for example, for your web browsing, SMTP over port 25 is over SSL is now a very common thing, to the point where we expect it on any viable email system. If your email system doesn't use SSL encryption, TLS, on its send and receive, at least opportunistically, you don't have what any normal person would consider a viable email system. That is a pathetically bad level of security that's intentionally crippled by any reasonable standard. In the real world, all the big email systems and any viable company email system and any serious hobbyist running their own email system has significant amounts of security on the transactions between the different servers. So if you're on Gmail and you want to send an email to Office 365 users, that the transition of email, the transmission of the email over the internet is completely encrypted through SSL tunnels. So you have a lot of security there. Security that makes things like snail mail and faxing just pathetic, because they do nothing like that. They are completely exposed. You, however, with email, are not. So sending to any normal user, now if you send to people who have obviously ridiculous emails, like they're using freebie email from their web hosting service or freebie email from the worst possible case, their ISP, one, just stop talking to those people. They don't have any reason to communicate with the real world. But if you have people doing that, yes, they may be exposing you to a ridiculous and insecure situation, because there are vendors out there, especially ISPs, who simply don't want people using their email and don't want it to be secure and have no interest in so whatsoever, because those people are not their customers. They may disable that because they see it as being cheap or something. Fine, but you can identify those people really, really easily. If you're dealing with actual business people or actual people who care in any way about their security, to the point of just being the most casual free email user you've ever met, you have a lot of security, and you can be pretty sure that nobody is seeing their email anywhere between the paths from you to them. And it's not just the transmission of email, it's also how we view email. Now this is ancillary, of course, because viewing email is not the same as email. But almost all the technologies we use today to view email, whether it's ActiveSync or it's direct web interfaces through HTTPS or it's IMAP-S or whatever, all of those protocols that are used to access and view mail messages once they've already been received by the server are also secure today. Again, if you're dealing with anyone who's using insecure IMAP or insecure POP, stop using them. And don't talk to anyone who uses systems like that. These are ridiculous scenarios that should never come up in the real world. There's no reason that anyone should be on a system that is intentionally exposed to that degree, or a web page that isn't under SSL. This is just silly, right? There's no reason for that to come up. And essentially nobody is actually affected by that except for people using freebie email from your ISP. There's free email from all kinds of great services like Google. Use it for free. There's no sensible reason to be using something that is so much worse. So because of that, we have an incredible amount of email security end-to-end for basically all users, even ones you've never met or talked to before. As long as you get their email address right, you will probably get a secure message to them with no one being able to intercept it in between. Now, we do have some simple standard methods for increasing security even further. Things like Pretty Good Privacy, PGP, and its open source equivalent, GPG, and things like that allow you to encrypt payloads. They become cumbersome, and they start moving us into the realm of, okay, so now we're doing things to like manually be a lot of effort and make email insanely secure. And that's important to know that it's out there and it's great and it works. But everything else, the TLS and the end-to-end security and the handling of administrators and all those components, those are just defaults. Those are free. They are simply how the world works today. They have changed how email is handled. And all we have to do is not be stupid and not cripple ourselves. And those are things that are always the case in any security system. You can have the best safe in the world, but if you don't lock it, it's not protecting your stuff, right? You can have the biggest deadbolt on your front door, but you still have to lock it and you still have to close the windows, right? You can't look at the world as, well, this thing's secure because I bought it, and so I don't have to do secure things with it. You still have to act secure. So that means sending to people who are sensible on sensible systems who are also caring to be secure, right? You can email the most secure document in the world to someone. If on the other end, they're a person who's going to print it out and put it on a bulletin board, you've defeated all of your security in between because you're insecure at the end. So those things remain and will always remain. But for real world, actual email usage, email is a very secure protocol because every piece of it is encrypted. Every piece of it under normal usage is protected, and it goes point to point from you to the person that you were trying to contact. It doesn't go through third-party servers in between like it used to decades ago, and you can safely feel that your message will have gone directly from you to where it's going, encrypted along the way. So I hope that helps explain why we shouldn't be panicking about using email, because it really is a pretty safe method of communicating compared to other things that are out there, and it's one that we tend to control an awful lot. And this is a big one, it doesn't have a central authority. Unlike, say, Google Instant Messenger, which might be pretty secure, Google stores all of that. The government can go and subpoena Google. Someone could, in theory, hack into Google and get everyone's messages. There's a place where they're all stored that you don't control. When you're dealing with email, you're dealing with point to point, from you to the other person. And so you have the option of controlling one or both of those endpoints, and in doing so, at no point is the email stored in anyone else's server. It never goes anywhere else. So you have a peer-to-peer or point-to-point connection, and that allows you to have a certain amount of security, at least security control, that you can't have using centralized methods such as a third-party service that mimics email, which is what a lot of companies do. They want to get away from email because it makes them money to do so, and so they sell a service that they call email that is not. It's actually just a file hosting service with like a web page or something, and when you use them, they actually store your files. Now they may provide some cool things that make it so they can't read it. Who knows? But they are storing those things centrally, whereas with email, you do not. Remember to like and subscribe, and if you have questions and comments, remember to put them below. And if you want to sponsor us, you can do so on Patreon.